All right. So after last night's class, I realized that I had messed up the Zoom recording. So I was going to go ahead and re-record this in order to upload it to YouTube. This will be slightly shorter than the class since it will not contain all of the questions that people had the opportunity to ask. And we're going to try and get through this a little bit quicker in order to save on everyone's time. In this presentation, we'll go through the asthma and allergy section of the presentation. We'll talk about, and then we'll end by talking about air quality and how to manage some of those symptoms. All right, so it's important to note that uh, asthma, as we're talking about it here, is a chronic disease. It does not have any known cure. It can be effectively controlled using two methods. So using, obviously, of course, your prescription medication. We would encourage everyone to talk to their doctor and their pharmacist to best understand how to use those efficiently. And then also environmental triggers, which is what this course will be about in order to how to best inform and protect yourself, your family, and the others who may enter your home and may be presented with some of these challenges. It's important to remember that on average, Americans spend about 90% of their time indoors. So that is why this information is so very important. The 8 tips for keeping a healthy home: keep it dry, clean, pest-free, ventilated, safe, contaminant-free, maintained, and green. So here at the Extension office, we'll be more than happy to help answer questions about any of these areas. I'd encourage you to look over all of our presentations previously uploaded to our YouTube channel and ask us as many questions as possible. And we'll go through more of these facts as we continue the presentation. All right, so as we said earlier, asthma is a chronic disease. It cannot be cured. However, it is very treatable, and we can do a lot to help those suffering from it. In the US, there's about 7 million children under the age of 18 affected by asthma. So we would definitely want to keep them in our hearts and minds and try and keep our homes as safe as possible for these folks. This can be a life-threatening condition. It is also a very expensive condition. In the US, we spend about $20 billion per year just on the medical side. So hospital visits, physician visits, medical costs, prescription costs. That number doesn't even include all of the missed days at work that parents have, or people with asthma, or the missed schooling opportunities that children miss out on because of their asthma symptoms, or the mitigation steps that have to be taken because it's such a debilitating condition. Who primarily suffers? So children tend to be the biggest thing we're worried about. The average healthy adult breathes about 15 times per minute, whereas children and infants can breathe as many as 30 times a minute. So they're taking in twice as much air, just like they're taking in twice as much food and water as an adult may at one time. So it's really important for them to keep them in mind and eliminate these hazards. Even if your children don't have asthma, these can help potentially mitigate or slow down that occurring in their bodies. Additionally, children who are low income or in urban areas, certain minority populations, people who have other allergies tend to have it higher as well. And then anyone who maybe has a family history of asthma tends to be at higher risk as well. If you're wondering what happens during an asthma attack, if you think about sort of the very basics of our physiology, we sort of start out in our mouth, which is a big hole, and sort of it gets smaller and smaller as it goes down into our lungs and all to the little tiny tubes down at the end. What asthma does is there's a sort of a baseline level of inflammation where it's sort of the muscles are slightly larger, meaning that the airways are slightly smaller. And then during that asthma attack, they get even bigger, they secrete mucus, and so that baseline level of inflammation increases and becomes very, very difficult to breathe. This, of course, is very dangerous, and individuals may not be able to breathe at all during an asthma attack. If you are ever curious, please don't do this if you have asthma or any other type of breathing problems. But if you are a healthy adult and you want to know what it feels like to try and breathe during an asthma attack, you can try either jogging in place or doing jumping jacks for 30 seconds and then sort of pinch your nose and try to breathe through a straw. And that may sort of approximate that feeling of having all of your lungs sort of filled with mucus and swelling at the same time. If you're know that someone you're working with has asthma and you start seeing these symptoms, coughing, wheezing, especially more of a squeaking sound, the fast breathing, shortness of breath, hunched over posture, restless sleeping, vomiting a prominent neck muscles, out of breath, and when they maybe not necessarily would be otherwise. And if their skin is changing color, then you may want to keep an eye on them. We certainly wouldn't want to leave them alone, make sure they're okay, and return to normal. These don't necessarily mean that they are having an asthma attack. Of course, these are symptoms for other conditions as well. But we definitely, if we know that someone has asthma, we want to make sure we're keeping an eye on them if they're exhibiting these symptoms. All right, so we can control asthma in two ways. The medication prescribed by doctors, always make sure you're taking your medication as prescribed, and I always refer those questions to a medical provider. Additionally, but what we can help with is controlling those environmental factors that may be debilitating as well. And these are sort of irritants to everyone, but they may be especially difficult for folks with asthma. All right, so most of the common asthma triggers are indoor problems. They may be toxic inside, but not outside, because our air tends to be dirtier inside, and we spend 90% of our time inside. So that makes it additionally difficult when trying to work through these challenges. So we have different allergens like molds, dusts, certain animals, pollen, food, and pests. And then irritants like secondhand smoke, strong odors, ozone, and then chemicals and cleaning compounds. It's important to remember that every person is different. So one person might be allergic to mold, one person might be allergic to a certain pest. No two people are alike. It's important to not just assume, hey, I have asthma and it works in this way, to not assume that, my child's asthma or my friend's asthma is going to respond to similar allergens and irritants. So keep those factors in mind when cleaning your home. All right, so we're going to look at the sort of three basic strategies: identifying the problem, controlling the source, and then doing some mitigation. So our most common indoor triggers tend to be secondhand smoke, dust mites, mold, pests, and pests. So we'll go through those a little bit in more detail. However, the other triggers tend to be vapors from like cleaning solvents, paint, like liquid bleach, mothballs, glue, any type of spray or aerosol product. If you think of it's a question that's coming, what is an aerosol? Those products that sort of you hold down the button and they spray continuously. Is tend to be what we're talking about with that, not sort of the pump action specifically. We would always encourage, you could use the green cleaning curriculum that we did a lecture on in the past. It is uploaded to the YouTube channel, and the recipes were provided. We would also, if you're purchasing your own products, we would encourage you to buy ones that are low toxic and fragrance free in order to sort of minimize the amount of particles in the air. However, if you need a quick cleaner that's not going to interfere, just hot water with a little bit of vinegar can make a very powerful cleaning agent. Pollen, we've all probably had that week during the year where our sort of like our face seems to stop working because there's so much pollen in the air. It tends to be transported by the wind. It can come from grasses like ragweed, trees like pine, birch, and oak. It can often get inside. We'll talk about how to keep it from getting inside a little bit more later. But when it's pollen season, always make sure you're closing your windows. And then make sure you're following that home maintenance checklist that we provided to make sure that there's no exterior issues, making sure your seals are well caulked and weather stripping around doors and windows is intact and replaced as needed. All right. So first, we'll talk a little bit about secondhand smoke. So secondhand smoke contains over 4,000 substances. We know about 40 of them to be carcinogenic, and they tend to be more harmful to young children. It causes excessive coughing, phlegm, reduced lung capacity, and other potential irritations. Secondhand smoke is not the only smoke that causes issues. So things from like candles and natural gas may also cause issues. So If you or your children have asthma, maybe you need to replace your hot water heater, go from gas to electric. Potentially, you may really enjoy your gas stove, but maybe for the good of the family, it may be better to replace it. If you do use it, make sure that you're running your exhaust fan before and after it's used to ensure that you are getting as much of those particles out of the air as possible. The action steps would be to make sure you're just not allowing people to smoke. If you have smokers in your family, always encouraging them to quit smoking. I'm trying to limit the use of things like fireplaces and candles, always using those exhaust fans over your stove. And important to remember that smoke particles tend to stick to clothing. So if you have a family member who does smoke, make sure they're not just sort of standing right outside the home. They're going sort of farther away so when the door opens, it's not sucking that smoke inside the home. And then after they smoke, if they use cigarette or tobacco products, they are changing clothes before they hold a young child. All right, dust mites. This is a little bit graphic, so if you need to skip forward in the video, please feel free to do so. But dust mites are far too small to be seen, and they tend to be everywhere. They live in very soft bedding products. They feed on dead skin cells. So if you remember from your high school biology class, all of the skin that we see is dead and it flakes off in little small pieces all over the place. And that is the food for dust mites. So it's sort of never impossible. It's impossible to get rid of them completely. So we're sort of trying to mitigate their numbers. People can be allergic to the mites themselves, the mite droppings, as well as the dead mite bodies. So that is pretty gross. And it's important to try and get rid of those. They love warm, humid places. Where is a warm, humid place? Well, probably the entire state of Georgia, but also sort of inside our homes where we sort of make them comfortable for ourselves. We're sort of providing a nice shelter and food situation for the dust mites. In order to control their reproduction, we would encourage you to try and wash your sheets and blankets at least once a week in hot water and in a hot dryer. Make sure you're choosing bedding products that can be easily washed. You're going to, if you're not going to be able to wash in like a comforter or a quilt pretty easily, then maybe it'd be better to use a different option for your daily sleeping arrangements. Try and make sure your air conditioner is running in order to lower your humidity levels. We want to make sure we keep those humidity levels between 30 and 50%. Removing carpet may be necessary for more sensitive individuals. Use our microfiber cloths for cleaning to help make sure we're getting up as much of that stuff as we can. Vacuum things like mattresses, chairs, carpeting often, and you can use a HEPA vacuum or a microfiltration bag. Use mattress covers and pillow covers that are dust proof and allergen impermeable zipper covers. Make sure you're replacing our pillows every 5 years. For children, it may be important to limit stuffed animals that you can't wash. It's important to know that freezing also kills the dust mites. So I do have a favorite teddy bear for children with asthma. It may be really important to take the teddy bear for 2 or 3 days, put them in a Ziploc bag to prevent them from being damaged with moisture, and in the freezer for a few days to make sure those dust mites are dead, because they wouldn't necessarily fare well in the washing machine. All right, mold. So we had a whole presentation on mold, so we won't spend too much time on this. Please check that out if you have more questions or if you have us a phone call. But mold is a type of fungus that grows on damp surfaces. They release spores that can cause damage and irritation. The important thing to know is that they grow on organic material, so things like wood, drywall, wallpaper, carpet, and especially foods. Don't tend to show up on things like metal, but it's not necessarily a mold that you may be dealing with, but it can find a home all kinds of places. So the issue with mold tends to be moisture, so always trying to make sure we're getting rid of that moisture first. Make sure you're maintaining an indoor air humidity between 30 and 50%. Remember that warm air holds more water than cool air. Use your air conditioner to keep those humidity levels relatively stable. Always make sure we're fixing leaky plumbing as quickly as possible. Emptying and cleaning our refrigerator drip pans, running bathroom fans anytime that water is in use there. Make sure our dryer is properly exhausting. control moisture in our crawl space. And then if you need to, replacing carpet with a hard surface flooring. We always want to make sure our exhaust fans are working, so you can use what we call the toilet paper test, where you just tear off 1 or 2 squares of toilet paper, hold it up to the fan. It should be able to suck it up flush with the exhaust fan. If it can't do that, maybe it just needs to be clean because there has a lot of dust in the way. But if it still doesn't work, then it may just be time to replace it. They are mechanical devices, so they can and will fail. Remember, with mold, we don't want to encourage testing for it. If you see it, you just need to, or see it or smell it, you need to find it and clean it up. Um, the only exception would be if your doctor has specifically requested that you test for it in order to aid in your healthcare treatment. We don't often encourage bleach. Soap and water tends to be satisfactory for cleaning up mold. If you do choose to use bleach, we would encourage you to follow the manufacturer's directions, or about 1 part of bleach per 10 parts of water. Always use caution when cleaning. We encourage you to use something like an N95 mask, which is going to block almost all the particles and keep your lungs safe while cleaning up something that's really quite nasty. All right, pets. So I have my 2 cats at home. I love them very much, but it's important to keep some things in mind about them. Their skin flakes, urine, and saliva can be asthma triggers. They can be irritating for everyone. And it's also important to know that triggers may remain for several months after an animal is removed. So maybe you get a piece of furniture or clothing from a different family that has pets. It may be important to know that it still may have some of that dandruff or particles that may be irritating to some folks. We would always encourage, if you can, keep your pets outside, or at the very least, keep them off of beds and out of the bedroom. Make sure we are keeping them off our furniture fabric if we can, using that HEPA vacuum we talked about earlier. If they have a litter box, a pet bed, or cage, make sure we're not keeping those in the bedroom, keeping those far away. And then if they do pets, if you do get on your bed, make sure we're washing those in very hot water, and washing those pet items in hot water as well. All right, here's information on pests. So many people are allergic to the body parts or droppings of cockroaches. Particularly people who have dust allergies may also have allergies to these types of pests as well. With pests, 3 steps are always going to be prevention, identification, and control. So it's important to think about pests are sometimes like us. They always need food, water, and shelter. So we want to try and eliminate as many of those things as possible. So we talked about the leaky water fixtures. Maybe a source of mold would also be a source of water for pests. They love, making sure we're keeping our kitchens. This would be the biggest spots, keeping them clean, keeping our counters clean, not letting dishes pile up. Another big thing is that they love paper, so paper grocery sacks. They also love cardboard. So there's a common misconception that they eat the cardboard. They don't eat the cardboard. They eat the glue that holds the cardboard together. So if you think about, you're sort of creating a nice warm space that's full of food for them, which is exactly where they want to try and get to. So if you do have things you need to store, tax returns, Christmas decorations, whatever, we encourage you trying to store those in something that's not cardboard, so maybe like a plastic container or similar, in order to not create a nice warm home for cockroaches to spend the winter. When you're controlling pests, we always want to encourage something called an IPM, or integrated pest management solution. We're not just trying to dump out as many pesticides as we possibly can into your home and around your home. We're trying to eliminate that food and water. We're trying to make sure our rooms are ventilated properly, so that we're actually not just killing the pests that we have, we're preventing new ones from coming in and killing the ones. So we're sort of taking a systemic approach to make sure we are knocking them out completely. If you are still having issues, you may choose to use an air cleaner. We would call these an air cleaner of last resort. Pleated fibers work better than fiberglass, so make sure you are choosing those. HEPA stands for high efficiency particulate air. So those are that's sort of the highest quality. If you're choosing an air cleaner, make sure one that is not too big or too small. So too small, it's not going to effectively clean the room that it's been placed in, and too big can cause the unit to burn out very quickly. So you're not getting your money's worth. You want to get a unit that's properly sized. Additionally, you want to make sure that it does not produce ozone. So ozone is a toxic irritant. And so, of course, we don't want to bring an item into our home. It's supposed to clean our air while making it more dangerous. On a quick side note, some other things that may be interesting to folks. Asthma triggers may include things like exercise. So if you do have asthma, make sure you're communicating with your doctor about how to do that safely. Any type of cold, flu, or respiratory infection. So we encourage you, always get all of your recommended vaccinations, like your annual flu shot. Cold weather symptoms tend to we see more asthma attacks during the colder season, and then really strong fragrances can be an issue as well. All right, so that ends the asthma portion of the presentation. So now we'll move on to sort of correcting those problems and keeping our indoor air clean. Remember, people spend about 90% of their time indoors, where pollutants are 2 to 5 times higher than the outside. Those pollutants include mold, pests, and dust mites, hazardous products, lead, carbon monoxide, and radon. So our action steps are always going to be keeping it clean, controlling the source, improving our ventilation, and cleaning our air. So our action steps, we want to do regular cleaning, making sure we're keeping our home clean. That is going to help improve our air quality. Vacuuming twice a week with our HEPA vacuum. I'm using a damp mop to sort of pick up that dust. Using a dust microfiber cloth, washing our bedding at 130 Fahrenheit water to kill those dust mites and remove them, and then covering pillows and mattresses and box springs with dust mite proof covers. We always want to try and bring less things indoor to help improve our air quality. So having a doormat outside and inside, encourage people to either look to leave their shoes at the door to keep them from tracking those further inside the home. Either buying safer cleaning products, the low toxic and the fragrance free that we talked about, or making their own. And then storing chemicals and pesticides away from indoor spaces. So people are going to be exposed to those VOCs less. We, of course, encourage regularly maintaining your HVAC system, as we talked about in our maintenance checklist, and then having carbon monoxide detectors and testing for radon. Remember, we said we want to control our VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. So that includes, doing things like when you're replacing your carpeting, making sure that they have low emissions ratings, making our own air fresheners instead of relying on store-bought versions, trying to avoid aerosols where we can, limiting pressed wood products, and not letting anyone stay in our home. We talked about this Safer Choice EPA badge located on the slide here. So you can choose products that have that badge to have a safer and healthier. Improving ventilation helps to dilute the particles or get them out of exhaust. So you're sort of increasing the cubic area of your home. And the easiest way to do that is going to be removing things from closets. So in addition to running those bathroom fans, kitchen fans to sort of exhaust air, we can help them out by making more space. So for example, maybe having a closet and trying to remove a third to a half of all the contents in there, especially ones that have doors with slats, is going to have more ventilation and keep your home healthier. All right, so for selecting our air filters, we want to make sure we are choosing pleated air filters that are compatible with your HVAC system. If they are too small, then the air is going to sort of bypass the filter and not receive its cleaning benefits. The short of it is the higher the MERV rating, MERV, the more particulate matter that is removed. If you were trying to save a few dollars but still get a high quality filter, you may choose a MERV rating between 17 and 20, which will be comparable to a HEPA filter. HEPA means that it blocks 99.97% of particles that are 0.3 microns or larger. A quick and dirty test is if you're holding up an air filter in front of you at the store, you can see your hand on the opposite side of it. So if the air filter is here, my hand is underneath it. If I can see it moving, then that is not going to be a high quality air filter. It needs to be high enough that you can't see that. So that's a quick and dirty test if you're ever trying to explain to someone how to change your air filter. We encourage changing air filters every 90 days. If you're purchasing an air cleaner, air cleaners can also help reduce the indoor air pollutants. When choosing a cleaner, make sure that it is the right square footage for your home and it has a high CADR for smoke, and that filters particles that are 0.1 to 1 micrometers. Air cleaners measure air in cubic feet of air. So you can see on this badge here, this is for a room that is 120 square feet. So you wouldn't want to put it in too much larger of a room. Make sure that you are choosing options that are quiet and that they do not generate ozone. So remember that it can be dangerous for your family. So you definitely don't want to increase that in our home. All right, so remember our action steps: using microfiber cloths, leaving shoes either outside or right at the door, making sure we're trying to clean out at least one closet by removing a third of the contents to improve ventilation, making sure we have carbon monoxide detectors and replacing those batteries every 5 years, and then using our bathroom and kitchen fans. If you want some information on these green cleaning recipes, please feel free to contact our office and we'll be happy to give you some more information about that. All right, here is my contact information. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'll be more than happy to answer any and all questions. Thank you so much for watching.